Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just some instructions before we begin the webinar. Looks like everyone's logged in using their computer, microphone, and speakers. You can dial in by telephone if you'd like, and you can change that setting by going to the Audio tab in the GoToWebinar software. There's a radio button where you can choose telephone or microphone and speakers. Since we've got a large group today, I will keep everyone unmuted, or excuse me, I'll keep everyone muted. At the end of the presentation, once we are ready for question and answer, if you just click the raise hand button, I'll know to unmute you and you can ask your question to the group. Otherwise, feel free to type in your questions into the chat panel or the questions panel. A little short-handed today, so it's just me doing the webinar. Usually we have at least one more person logged in answering questions while I present. So I will periodically take a look and see if there are any questions. If there's anything pertinent to what we're going over at the current time, I'll pose that question to the group. Otherwise, I'll save it for the end. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please just type them in, and I will periodically check those. Today's webinar is all about customizing ZoomText. So we're going to go through a number of different areas in the program that you can customize, such as some features, and then how to customize things like your speech and using the app settings feature, which is a really powerful tool if you want to have custom settings on a per application basis. Okay, and my name is Derek Bovey. I work here as our technical product manager, mainly in our sales and marketing department. So here's an outline of what we're going to cover. The first thing we'll do is go over how you can customize the enhancements. We'll start with the color enhancement, and I'll show you a few quick tips on how to get the best results with that. Pointer, cursor, and focus enhancements are really kind of what your preference is as far as how you want those enhancements to look. And then we'll show you what the custom settings are that are available in App Reader and Doc Reader. Basically, you can customize the look of how the highlight appears in both of those features. And then we'll talk about speech. I'll show you where you can go to change your voice, as well as the synthesizer and your speech rate. And then talk a little bit about the verbosity settings and what those do. Then finally, the last two things we'll cover is using application settings and configuration files. All right, because you can save as many configuration files of ZoomText as you want. A lot of people like to have a different configuration for during the daytime and then at night when their eyes are tired. So I'll show you how you can save out different configuration files and even assign them to hotkeys. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover here today. And at the end, we will have a question and answer session. Okay? All right, so why don't we jump right into the live demo. I'm going to switch over here really quickly, and you're going to see ZoomText is already running over here on my other screen. So I've got ZoomText open. We're at 2x magnification. I just have the large yellow pointer enhancement off, or excuse me, on. I have speech turned off for the time being, so if you're wondering why you're not hearing anything, it's because I have speech turned off. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to customize these enhancements. Easiest way to do this is to click on the appropriate feature. We're going to start with the color enhancement and then go down to settings. If you click on custom, this is going to select whatever the last custom scheme is that you created. In this case, I haven't created any custom scheme, so what it actually defaults to is the replace gray color scheme. Don't ask me why it does that, but that's effectively what happens when you choose custom without customizing anything. It might be hard to tell that anything changed on screen, but trust me, it actually did. So what you want to do to create your first custom scheme is click on the icon and then go down to settings. This is going to open up the enhancements dialog. You can also get here by just clicking on the enhancements heading right here. It'll bring you to the same dialog box. Okay, so in here what you're going to want to do is choose the custom radio button, and right now I'm on the color tab, so that's the feature that I'm customizing. So I'm going to click on custom, and then underneath I have an area of all the different custom settings I can choose. Now the first thing you'll want to pick for the color enhancement is what type of color enhancement you're going to want to customize. So you can create a black and white scheme, reverse video, dyed, which basically dyes the entire screen in a certain hue of colors that you've made. 2-color, replace color if you want to replace like gray with white, or remove color, which will take that color range out completely. I'm going to show you some of the more useful custom settings, and one of those is creating your own 2-color scheme. And so I'm going to click 2-color. It's going to automatically default to black foreground color and white background color. Okay. Now this dialog is a little bit tricky because I feel like the settings are actually kind of given to you in reverse. So I'm going to go through an example here. Now if I want to have a good color scheme to choose that's not a preset here is yellow on blue, yellow text on a black background. Okay. Now if you look at the presets in here, you're going to see dark green, dark magenta, dark blue, lots of dark colors for foreground, and then the background presets are all lighter colors, yellow, light green, cyan, slate blue, etc., etc. If you choose the more colors option, this will bring up a color picker where you can choose one of the basic colors, or if you use this define custom colors, it'll bring up this swatch here, and you can literally just click in here and choose what color you want. Okay, but I'm going to show you a little trick that I just found. So if I wanted to do yellow on blue, okay, there's no yellow for a foreground color I can choose here, but there is dark blue. So if I make my foreground dark blue and my background yellow, okay, this is basically the opposite of what I want. But there's a checkbox here that says Invert Brightness. This will reverse those two colors. So yellow is going to become my foreground, dark blue will become my background. So if I click that checkbox, notice we've got a really nice looking color scheme here with not a lot of in-between or grayish type colors. You've got a really bright white foreground or text color, and then dark blue, background color. Okay, so this is a pretty good looking scheme. Now just to show you really quick, I'm going to go back to this, but I want to show you you can create some really awful looking color schemes in here. So if I did dark green on light green, you're going to see that that's really hard to see. It's very blurry. So a lot of these color combinations aren't going to work well. You really have to play with them to see what works best. All right, so I'm giving you an example of a couple of these that work rather well. So dark magenta on yellow, even in its normal scheme, non-inverted, doesn't look too bad, but I don't think that's going to help most people. But if we invert that to get, I want a dark blue. Yellow on blue, you're going to see that looks pretty good. Now you can fine-tune this by adjusting the brightness and contrast of the colors as well. Now the brightness control, if you drive it up, it really starts to wash the image out. I would generally tell people to stay away from adjusting the brightness control. That's like if you were to adjust the brightness on your monitor. Contrast adjustment can be helpful. If you drive it down, it's basically going to decrease the difference in color between the foreground and background colors. If you increase it, okay, you're going to start eliminating some of those differences. So you actually lose detail if you increase it too much. If you notice, if I drop this down a little bit, there's this light kind of grayish frame around parts of the dialog box and text in our interface. If I drive this contrast control up too much, those disappear completely. So you don't want to drive contrast all the way up. You might want to bring it down a couple notches just so you can retain some of that detail a little bit better. Okay, so you're going to use the brightness and contrast control to really refine the color scheme that you've created. So now if I click OK, first of all, we're still going to be in this scheme, but if I go back to normal or a normal color, and if I choose custom, you'll see it'll load that yellow on dark blue scheme that I've created. Okay, so that's what will show up in the custom field is after you've created a custom scheme. Okay, so that's one example is using yellow on dark blue. And again, I inverted it because I really wanted yellow to be the foreground color. Now, if you want to kind of brute force this, you can do it. What I mean by that is if I wanted to just off the bat choose yellow on blue, I could go into foreground color. I don't see yellow in here, so I'll go to more colors, choose yellow, Okay. Now I'm in a situation where this might be really hard for me to see. Luckily, I can still see it, so I'm able to see where the background color drop-down is, and I'm going to go in here again to More Colors and find a dark blue color, okay, in the color picker. All right, so now I've got a really true yellow on blue color scheme, okay, and you can see that reflected here. It's got a much brighter background than the dark blue color I had before. Okay, and again, you can play with these contrast and brightness controls. It looks like in this case, dropping the contrast down, almost all the way down to the bottom, actually makes this image look its best. And you can play around with inverting those colors. Inverting this probably isn't going to be very helpful for a lot of people, but this is really something you'll need to go into and experiment with. But I think a couple things just to keep in mind if you're going to go and play with this control afterwards. Play around with inverting the scheme that you've selected here. Sometimes inverting what you've chosen can bring you to a color scheme that's really good. Also try driving the contrast down. Generally turning it down is going to help retain definition of the image. And then you might want to go to More Colors and choose many other color ranges that aren't represented in some of the presets here. Okay, but creating your own two-color scheme in ZoomText can be very helpful because some of these presets that we have here might be pretty limited. It might not suit your needs, so you might need to create your own custom scheme. Okay, and if you've created a custom scheme that you really like, make sure, and this is just a rule of thumb, make sure you go to the File menu and choose Save as Default. That way, every time you come into the color filter and choose Custom, it's whatever that last custom scheme is that you made. Okay. Now, I'll just talk briefly about a few of the other options that you have here. Remove and replace color. I'll show you replace color. So this is a good example of a replace color. So one of the presets in here, we have dialog box gray. A lot of people don't like, and you can see it represented here because I've got the contrast all the way down, but these gray colors on dialog boxes, a lot of people don't like having that color there. So you could replace that gray with white, and you'll see if I drive the contrast, well, I actually want to leave the contrast in the middle. What I want to play with here is this bandwidth slide bar. As you drag this up or down, you're going to see it will change the amount of that gray that's being replaced. So at the very least, at 0%, it's not replacing any of that dialog box gray with anything. But at 100%, if you just look to the right of the bandwidth slide bar, you'll see that Restore Normal Settings button. Okay, it's kind of like a gradient white to gray color. As I drag the bandwidth slide bar up to 100%, you're going to see now it's completely white. And there's this preview histogram down at the bottom which shows you the color ranges. And as I drag the bandwidth slide bar up, you see that histogram change. So that's showing me what colors are now being represented of the full spectrum. So I've basically eliminated a lot of the bottom part of the spectrum by increasing the bandwidth. Okay, so that's effectively getting rid of a lot of gray color on my screen. So if you have a certain eye condition, or you have trouble with a certain type of color, maybe you want to replace, red with blue. I don't know how well that's going to work because there's a lot of red there's a lot in the color range that you might not be able to replace. If you look at the histogram, for example, I have yellow chosen here. There's still a lot of yellow left, even if the bandwidth is all the way up. But let me just move this. If you look at the ZoomText icon over here, okay, notice as I increase the bandwidth, got rid of pretty much all the yellow color. It's not going to work perfect 100% of the time because there's just so many color ranges and mixtures of colors that you're never going to be able to completely eliminate. But this is a nice tool if you struggle with a certain color and want to replace it with another one. Okay, that's a really handy way to use the color filtering custom settings as well. Some of these other settings are a little bit less useful, like dyed, for example. Basically, is going to dye the screen in a certain hue of colors. Some people might like this, others may really hate it. But basically, anything other than black, white, or gray will be dyed with a certain color that you've chosen here. There's a few examples: light red, light blue, light magenta. You can see that represented here. So any of the black, white, or gray colors are retained, but any of the other red, green, blue color schemes are dyed with whatever you've chosen in the color picker. All right. So you have a lot to experiment in this dialog with as far as the color filter goes. But 2 colors is probably going to be what people are going to find the most useful in creating their own custom scheme in ZoomText. Okay. So that's how you customize the color enhancement. Let me go ahead and set this back to normal color. Now I'll show you how you can customize the pointer, cursor, and focus enhancements. It's going to be the same type of operation here. You can click on the enhancement and go to Settings. And once you get to the dialog box, choose Custom. And as far as these go, they're relatively straightforward. You can customize the size, so standard large or extra large, color, and if you want a locator on the mouse pointer, you can customize that as well. Right now I have the cross on. You could have it circled. You can adjust the thickness and the color of that locator, as well as its transparency from clear to solid. Okay, and then when you want that locator to be displayed, all the time, when the pointer's stationary, so if I move it, it doesn't appear, or when it's moving, so if it's stationary, it doesn't appear, or when you press a certain key, a certain modifier key, Control, Alt, Shift, or Windows key. So anytime, right now, Control is selected. Anytime I hold down the Control key, the locator shows up. Okay, so those are the options you have here. Again, relatively straightforward. You can customize the size, color, and whether or not you want one of these locators turned on. Just to show you the options, you've got the circle, sonar, which basically kind of pulses big to small, the full cross, which goes the entire length of the screen, and the crosshairs, which kind of looks like the crosshair on like a scope. And you can customize, again, the thickness, color, and transparency of that, as well as when the locator is displayed. Okay, so those are all the options that you have for the pointer enhancement. All right, a little bit less complex than what you can do in the color enhancement. So that one's pretty straightforward. And again, anytime you make settings, changes in ZoomText that you want to keep, make sure you save those. All right, so we'll move on to the cursor enhancement. I can just click on the tab up here at the top of the dialog box. I don't have to close out and click on the icon and go to settings. They're all here in the same dialog. So the cursor enhancement, this is going to work a little bit differently since we're working with the text cursor. Notice up here it says preview, click here to preview. If I click up there, I can see what my current cursor scheme is, which right now is set to wedges at medium size, blue color, and transparencies in the middle. So anytime I want to see the changes I've made, I can click up here so that the text cursor shows up. I'm going to turn off the focus enhancement because it's a little bit distracting. So 3 different types. You've got the wedges, which you saw up there before, circle, circle, or frame, which kind of looks like the app reader frame a little bit. You can adjust the size, so basically thin, medium, or thick, basically the size of the enhancement rather than thickness. I'm just going to click through a couple of these so you can see them. And then the color of that enhancement as well. I'll go with circle. I think that probably illustrates this the best. So if you wanted a yellow circle that was solid and transparency, you could make that. And if I arrow through, you'll see it follows the text cursor as well. Or you could make it really clear if you wanted to. So those are the main options here you have are 3 different types: the wedge, circle, or frame, 3 different sizes. Again, the thick one is really going to be quite large, so you might want to stick with medium or thin. And then you can adjust the color and transparency, just like the the pointer enhancement. And then again, you can decide when you want that cursor locator to show up. When it's stationary, so if I'm moving the text cursor with my arrow keys, notice that it doesn't show up until I stop. Okay, or you can have it only show up when it's moving. So if I'm arrowing left and right, that's when it shows up. But if it's stationary, it disappears. I think most people are going to want the stationary if they want any sort of option with this, and then when a modifier key is pressed, just like with the pointer enhancement. So if I hit Control, it shows up. I let go of the Control key, disappears. Okay. So same sort of customization options available there as well. Last one I'll show you here is the focus enhancement. Again, similar layout. You've got 3 different types. Right now we're set to frame. There's block, which almost looks like a highlight. And one good use of this is to use like a yellow highlight. It looks like a highlighter. That's the block. And then underline. Okay. And you can adjust, just to show you here, you can adjust the transparency. So if you drag this almost all the way up to solid, you'll see this almost looks like using a highlighter on screen with the focus enhancement. Okay. Some people might like block, but one problem with it is that it kind of obscures the text behind it, so it might be hard to see that OK button. So 3 different types: underline, block, and frame. Frame is the default, but you could have a red underline that's a little bit transparent, and you can even adjust the margin, so how narrow or wide it is. Basically, it'll be, if it's all the way down to narrow, it's really tight around the control that it's highlighting. If you set it to wide, it's a little bit more offset from where that control is. Okay, so default is right in the middle, but if you want it to be really tight, set that all the way down to narrow. And then you can even adjust the thickness. So thin with that underline is going to be really thin, and then thick is going to be very thick, as you can see here. And that applies, again, to all of these different enhancements. Okay. So pretty straightforward, and again, you can have one difference here as far as the when to display the focus enhancement. Since this isn't something that's really moving, the other ones we have stationary and moving. Your options are to show it continuously or all the time, briefly, which basically means that the enhancement shows up for about 2 seconds and then disappears. So if I tab to the next control, it shows up, then it disappears. Okay, so you've got it. You can have it displayed all the time, briefly, or when you press a modifier key, Control or Shift in this case. So if I hold down Control, it shows up. If I let go, it disappears. Okay, so that's the one difference with the focus enhancement, is since it's something that's not really moving, your options are to display it all the time or just briefly and then disappear. Okay, so that's how you can customize all the enhancements in ZoomText. Since those enhancements are something that you're really going to set up probably right away, it might be good to know how to customize those in case some of the presets just aren't to your liking. So that's how you can customize all of those. Now on the reading side of things, let's talk about how you can customize App Reader or Doc Reader. Now the only way to customize the appearance of App Reader is to go to the Reader menu and choose App Reader. Okay, because when you're in the tool, there's no settings button. There's no way to customize it. So you have to go to the Reader menu and choose App Reader. And the options that you have, by default, it's going to track and highlight the words. If you didn't have that turned on, App Reader just reads. It doesn't highlight where it is. So you want to keep that on. This is another interesting option, exit App Reader at the end of the document. So many of you who have used App Reader, once it gets to the end, it says end of document, and then you have to quit out. If you have this option checked, App Reader automatically exits once it gets to the end of the document. So that's kind of helpful if you want to have that turned on. But as far as the appearance goes, this is very similar to what we have with the focus enhancement as far as the customization options go. You can have it one of 4 different types. Frame is the default. You've also got block, underline, and wedge, which kind of looks like the cursor enhancement. Choose underline right now. You can customize the thickness and transparency of that enhancement as well as the color. One cool one to use is invert. Using the inverted block, I think, is a handy one. So basically what it does is it'll invert the text that's being highlighted or being read at that current time. So if you look at the preview down here, you can see it. The text is black on a white background, but the highlighted text is white on black with that invert block. So that color scheme is kind of handy. Obviously, you don't want to do like a black block shape, that's going to make it hard to read. Some of these, again, it might obscure the actual text that you're looking at when using the block. So the one that I would recommend is if you want to use that block setting, invert block is a good one. I'll just show it to you real quick because I have Word open here. So if I started App Reader.
7 years ago our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty.
So if I pause it, you can see that that block is highlighting the current word, makes it stand out pretty well on screen. Okay. So just a quick demo of that right there. I'm going to go back to where we were. So pretty straightforward as far as your options go. You've got the 4 different highlights, or excuse me, shapes. I think wedge is probably the least useful because it might be hard to tell what word is actually being highlighted if it's a long word. So underline, frame, and block are going to be your best bets here. So for example, if you wanted a green underline that's solid and very thick, you could do that, and then just click OK. And again, to retain any of these settings, make sure you go to the File menu and choose Save as Default. Now, Doc Reader, to customize those settings, you can do it in 2 areas. One is from the Reader menu, if you choose Doc Reader, or if you're in Doc Reader. So if I go back to my Word document here and I start Doc Reader by pressing Alt-Shift-D, within Doc Reader there's a Settings button, which basically brings you to the same place. So if I click on Settings, it's going to open that same dialog that is on the Reader menu. And in here, you can customize many different things with Doc Reader. One is the font face and style, the document colors, so I can customize the look, and the highlight shape and color. So just to give you an example, let's say I wanted to use Verdana bold with yellow text on a blue background, okay? And you can see those changes reflected here. Now my highlight color is making it a little bit difficult to read, so maybe I'll see what invert block does. Well, that might be a little tough. Let's do red. That actually looks pretty well. They're pretty good. So you can choose again the color and shape. Now block, in this case, you can't adjust the thickness or transparency in Doc Reader, so that's why those are grayed out. But underline, you can adjust the thickness, transparency of that locator. Same thing with the frame, if you want it to look a little bit like App Reader. And then there's also the wedge scheme as well. But if you make these changes and click OK, you'll see them immediately reflected in Doc Reader the second you click OK.
Settings.
But just one other thing I want to show you. Block is the default highlight in Doc Reader, and you're going to notice that there are checkboxes up here that are grayed out. Use the fonts and styles from the captured document. What that means is if I want to use the actual text from the document, its font, face, and style, color, style, etc., I can do that in Doc Reader. Same thing with the document colors. Now we have a limitation for some reason. If you use block, these will be grayed out. So if you change it to anything else, underline, frame, or wedge, you can check these boxes, and it's going to use the original document font and colors of the actual document that you're reading. So if I click OK, oops, it looks like it didn't like that. Oh, there we go. Sorry, it exited out. It just took a second for it to load. So what it did was it took the, if you look, let me go back. You look at the title of the document. It's bold. It's a little bit larger text. All right, so we've got black text and a white background. I think this is Tahoma. Yep. If you've got the title is a little bit larger. And if we start Doc Reader, notice that the same changes are reflected in the Doc Reader window here. Okay, so if the original format is important to you and you need to retain that, whether it's the color or style of the text, just go into Settings and make sure you change your shape from anything other than block, and you can choose that. Now, you could keep the font and styles the same and use your own custom set of colors. So if I want it to be in the same font face as the original document, I can just check the top checkbox, but I can customize the colors if I want to do that. Now notice, now that I've done that, I've got my yellow on blue, but the font faces are the same, and even the bold style at the top and the heading is retained. So I can retain any emphasis that's created by the document author by using that setting and still have the benefit of my own custom colors in there. Okay, so lots of customization options available in DocReader. That's why a lot of people like using the tool because it's very customizable as far as the look of the feature goes. All right, so that's how you can customize AppReader and DocReader. I'm just going to check here and see if we've had any questions. It doesn't look like there's any questions so far. So go ahead and move on. Next thing we're going to talk about is how you can customize speech in ZoomText. So first thing to do is I have to turn speech on. So I'm going to go to the Reader tab, click on the speech icon, and actually I'll go down to Settings. This is where you're going to be able to customize speech. And I'll go ahead and turn speech on just by checking this box.
Enable speech output checked.
Okay, so now speech is turned on. Now, as far as your options go for customizing speech, the first thing you want to do is choose what synthesizer you want to use. And what this basically is a package of voices. Okay, the best sounding ones in ZoomText.
Synthesizer NeoSpeech English. NeoSpeech English
is going to be NeoSpeech English. Okay, it's going to sound the most human. It's going to have the most human sounding quality to it. There are some people that need very high speech rates. In that case, you would want to use something like True Voice or Via Voice.
Via Voice, I.
Okay, now with Via Voice,
default.
It's going to sound a little bit more robotic, but you can bump up the speech rate to extremely fast rates. So if I'm tabbing through these buttons, okay, you can see, I mean, I'm at an extremely high rate, but it's much faster than what NeoSpeech would be able to do for you. There are also, I'm going to switch back to
NeoSpeech English.
Now you're going to have different voices you can choose. So in the case of NeoSpeech,
voice
Paul, a male and a female voice, Paul
Kate.
and Kate.
Kate.
Okay, and so the main things that you're going to want to be concerned with is your speech rate.
Rate 55%.
So if it's
55%.
If it's a little too slow for you, you can bump it up. So it's 75%. I'm going to click on the Speak Sample button.
This is a test.
You can hear it's a little bit quicker than it was at 50%. Some people, the first time they're using ZoomText, it might be speaking a little bit too fast for them. So in that case, you might want to bump the rate down to about 40%.
This is a test.
Or even 30.
30%. This is a test.
Okay, so it can help your retention as far as listening to the speech engine goes. Now, some engines will allow you to adjust their pitch. NeoSpeech does not. But if you go to True Voice or Via Voice, you're going to see that you can adjust the pitch. Some of their rate settings are different for each synthesizer. For example, True Voice and Via Voice, there's a number given in words per minute. NeoSpeech is just a flat percentage. So some of these rate indicators may appear a little bit differently, but the pitch you can adjust if you like. A lot of times it just creates some really strange sounding voices, so generally I'd say leave them alone. But if we bump 40%. It up, you can hear it's a really high pitch.
50%.
Okay, and volume generally you're going to want to keep at 100%.
175.
Okay, so like I said, you can create some really weird sounding voices.
This is a test.
But there's plenty of different voices available. A lot of these are not very human sounding. Again, NeoSpeech is going to have the best quality as far as those go. But for those individuals that need a very, very high speech rate, True Voice and Via Voice are the other engines that we ship, and those you can bump the rate up very, very high with those.
NeoSpeech in 50%.
All right, so that's where you can customize the synthesizer and the voice that you're using in ZoomText. Another quick tip, the hotkey to change speech rate at any time, Control+ or Control-, and that's the plus or minus key on the number pad all the way at the right-hand side of your keyboard. So Control+,
75%.
you'll see that jumps it up. Control-,
45, 50%.
will bring it down. Okay? It's just a handy hotkey if you want to do that on the fly.
ZoomText user interface.
And I'm going to go ahead and disable speech for right now. Hotkey to toggle speech on and off in case you don't know or you forgot. Alt-Shift-S as in Sam.
Speech disabled.
Okay. Now the next speech control I'm going to show you is the verbosity control. If you've attended any of our other webinars, we've talked about verbosity and showed you the difference between the beginner and the expert modes. But what I'm going to show you here today is if you go into settings, what the options are that you have available in here. And I'll set this to beginner so everything is checked. If you really want to customize the sort of things that ZoomText speaks back to you, here's where you're going to want to do it. And it's in this verbosity settings list. These are all of the different items that ZoomText can speak. So for example, control name, okay, that's the name of the control I'm on, like the button.
Speech
So
enabled.
let me turn on speech, and if I tab to a control,
Select all button for hotkey use S.
okay, that button is called select all. If I uncheck cell name,
Select all button for
well, I might have to click OK, but it shouldn't say select all. It should just say button. Or excuse me, that's cell name. I'm sorry, control name.
verbosity settings checkbox not checked. Button for hotkey use S.
Now it just says button for hotkey use S. Okay, it didn't read the label to me since I have control name unchecked. All right, so in here you can really customize. If I don't want it to say button, don't tell me control
Verbosity
type.
not checked. For hotkey use S.
Now it's just telling me for hotkey use S. I'm not having it tell me the control name, its type, and I think
Verbosity settings not for hotkey use S.
I don't know which one is the hotkey.
For hotkey.
Yeah, there's another control, another setting for that. You might have to go in here and experiment with some of these. But again, the idea behind the verbosity control is to really let you customize what ZoomText says to you. So control name is the label of the control that you're on the button. Control type, what is it? Is it a button, a radio button, a checkbox? Whether or not you want it to speak that. Its value, if there's a number there, like if we were in like our speech rate control, the value is the percentage. So it would say, speech rate 50%. If you don't want it to say the value and just say speech rate, you can uncheck control value. Okay, there's a lot of different things in here. Dialog tab is like the, like for example here, typing mouse program and verbosity. If I were to tab through those, if I got my keyboard focus up there and was arrowing left and right, you're going to hear it say the tab name.
Program tab. Verbosity tab.
If I uncheck this,
Dialog tab check program verbosity.
Shouldn't say it, but that's what that dialog tab will do. So there's a lot of different settings that you have in here. Again, this might take some experimentation, but you've got controls for reading menus, reading message text, and down towards the bottom, reading the window title. So anytime you open a new application, there's a window that opens, and ZoomText will read the window title to you. If you don't want it to speak that, uncheck window title. Okay. Same thing with hotkeys. ZoomText will speak the hotkey when you press a hotkey combination. If you don't want it to do that, uncheck the ZoomText hotkey setting. This is very highly customizable in here. So a lot of times people might find, certain things that they want ZoomText to read back to them, whereas other things they might not want to have it read back. The most frequent requests as far as that go are window title and likely control type, like button, radio button, checkbox. Okay, you might just want the label to be read back to you. Here it is, control accelerator. If I just wanted ZoomText to read to me the label of the control, I would uncheck control accelerator, state, and type. Now, it's just going to say the label.
Select all.
Select all.
Unselect all. OK. Cancel. Help.
Okay. Now notice if I have these
Control accelerator. Select all button for hotkey use S.
Select all button for hotkey use S.
Unselect all button for hotkey use U.
Okay. So the hotkey, the instructions for the hotkey is the control accelerator.
Control
state. If it's a checkbox, it'll say checked or unchecked. That's what that setting does. Control type is, what is it? Is it a button, a radio button, checkbox. Okay, it will read that information to you. And then name is obviously the label. So if you want, you can just have it say the name by unchecking those other control options. Value I would keep on, though. So really, those are probably the most common requests, is I just wanted to read the label of the button, not all the other information, and then things like window title, maybe you don't want it to read the title of the new application that was just launched. Okay? So those are some ways that you can customize
ZoomText
your speech settings in ZoomText. All right, just checking to see if there's any questions. None so far, so we'll keep moving on. The last thing that we're going to talk about here today is using application settings and different configuration files in ZoomText. For those of you that don't know, there is a setting or a feature in ZoomText that allows you to have a custom setting on a per application basis. And what I mean by that is, let's say you are using your web browser. I'm going to go through this exercise with you right now. Let's say you're on the web, and I'll open up our blog. Okay. Now let's say on the internet you want to have ZoomText set up at, I'm going to bring up the toolbar. Let's do that again. At 4x with the overlay window and yellow with full cross mouse pointer. Okay. Let's say that this is a scheme that is best for you to use on the internet. All right. You can see most of the web page unmagnified, so you can see its layout, but then you've got magnification with the overlay window in ZoomText, wherever your mouse or keyboard focus is. Okay. If I want to use this setting every time I come into Firefox and don't want to have to continually change the settings every single time, all you need to do is make your changes. First of all, make sure you're in the actual application that you want to make these settings changes for. Set up ZoomText the way that you want, okay, which I've just done. Make sure that the application name listed on the ZoomText toolbar is the one that you want to save your settings for. And then very simply go to the File menu and click on Save Application Settings. Okay, I'm going to click that. It'll ask Save Application Settings for Firefox. It'll actually list the name of the application that we're currently in. I'm going to click Yes. Now, let's say I go to Microsoft Word. Notice that it automatically loaded my default configuration. All right, it went back to my default ZoomText setting. Okay, so in Firefox, I've now created this application setting, so anytime I open it, 4x, large yellow with full cross, and overlay is automatically loaded. If you go to any application that you haven't created a configuration file for, okay, in this case I've only created a configuration file for Firefox. So if I go to a different program, it's going to load whatever my default ZoomText settings are. In this case, 2x with the large yellow pointer. Okay. Now, let's give another example. Let's say I'm in Word. I can see it listed here. Let's say for me in Word, I'm best with my custom color scheme. Whoops, I guess it didn't save. I'm best with my custom color scheme that I created earlier, which was 2-color, dark blue on yellow, inverted. Sorry if I did that quick, but let's say that worked best for us. All right, and with the giant green mouse pointer. Okay, this is the best scheme for me in Microsoft Word. Again, make your changes, make sure you're in the right program, go to File, Save Application Settings, and then click Yes. So now anytime I'm in Word, it'll load this configuration. If I go to Firefox, we're in our 4x overlay with yellow with full cross, go back to Word, we're in our custom color scheme, full screen, 2x with the giant green pointer. Now if I open a different program, let's say I open Internet Explorer, which I haven't created an application setting for, again, it's going to load whatever the default ZoomText settings are. Okay, and you can see that it did that 2x normal color with the large yellow pointer. So you can see that application settings are very powerful. This way, if you like your ZoomText settings a certain way for a certain program, you can automatically set it up to load those settings without you having to change it every single time. All right? Now, another thing too is, let's say you've really messed up and you created these application settings and you want to get rid of them, or you want to see what programs you've made an application setting for. If you go to the File menu and click on Manage Application Settings, you'll see which programs you've created an application setting for, and whether it's checked or unchecked just means that if it's checked, it will automatically load that application setting for you. Okay, if it's unchecked, it won't do anything. If you messed up, you really created some funky scheme that you don't like, just delete, click Delete Selected, and it will delete the selected item in the list, and you can clear those out. So if you ever get stuck, go to the File menu, Manage Application Settings, delete everything, start over from scratch. Okay. Now, application settings are basically nested within your configuration file. Okay. So in order for me to save the application settings I've created, I need to make sure that I go to the File menu and choose Save as Default. If I always want those application settings to be retained, I need to make sure I save my configuration. So when we talk about saving as default or saving your configuration file, that is a global file that encompasses all of your settings in ZoomText, whether they're individual feature settings, your custom schemes, your voice settings, or any programs you've created an application setting for. Those are all contained within one configuration file. Okay? And that's the thing that we're going to talk about next. So within ZoomText, you have the ability, and again, I've kind of been preaching this entire webinar about save as default. Make sure you don't forget to do that. But you can also save out configuration files as many as you like. Okay, and within that configuration file is, again, going to be your current settings, any application settings you've created, and any other settings within ZoomText. So on the File menu, if you click Save Configuration, this is going to open up Windows Explorer and allow you to save that whole configuration file out on your computer. By default, there's a folder within the ZoomText Program folder called Config, and then a Users folder, and then the folder that it will be in currently is your username. So in my case, my username is dbovie, and that's where I'm going to find any configuration files I've saved. So this is handy because when you have multiple users on the same machine, they'll all be listed here under users. In this case, there's only one. But if you had multiple family members that use the same machine, or multiple individuals at an office that use the same workstation, you'll see all their user accounts listed here. Okay, so the File Save Configuration option allows me to save a configuration file that I can then load at any time. So let's say this is the configuration that I use in the morning. All right, I'll just go ahead and call this morning configuration. Okay. Now at night, I need to turn on reverse video and bump up my magnification level to 3x and use the red with circle pointer. All right, let's say at night I need this configuration because it's just easier on my eyes at that time. So again, I can go into the File menu, click Save Configuration. You'll see there's my morning configuration I saved earlier. This other one in here, ZTEN-US, that's my current default configuration, ZoomText English US. That was saved a few minutes ago. All right, so I can call this, night configuration. Okay. So I've saved those two schemes. At any time, if I want to load them, I'll just go to the File menu, choose Open Configuration, and double-click on the appropriate file. Okay, so I open the morning configuration, 2x, no color enhancement on. If we open the night configuration, we're at 3x, reverse video, red with circle. Okay, so you can load those at any time if that's helpful for you. And again, you can save out as many configuration files as you want in ZoomText. And that, again, that file encompasses everything. Any settings that you've made for any of the features and any application settings that you've created will all be within that configuration file. Also, the last few configuration files that you've loaded will show up at the bottom of the File menu as well. And there are some presets that we created that might be helpful for some of you. I'll just show you where they are. So you go to the File menu and click Open Configuration, and you want to go back up to the Config folder. Okay, there are some preset configurations. Some of these are a little bit outdated, like ZoomText with JAWS and ZoomText with window eyes. Hotkeys for those programs have changed, so they may no longer be valid. But ZoomText with laptop, for example, will remap the Alt plus and Alt minus keys to Alt
2.5x
to Alt page up and Alt page down. So if you don't have a number pad, that's a handy configuration to use. So you'll see any configuration
morning configuration
that you've opened are going to be listed here on the File menu. Now, another way to use configuration files, we showed you how application settings can be helpful. It automatically loads your settings when you get into a certain program. Let's say I wanted an easier way to load that nighttime configuration rather than having to go to File, Open Configuration, and choose that every single time. Well, we do have a feature in ZoomText, a hotkey that you can actually assign configuration files to. And you can find that by going to Settings and then Hotkeys. And in the hotkey group, you're going to choose Configuration. That's just going to filter the list so you can find these easier. And you'll see in the hotkey command list, you've got Load Configuration 1, 10, because it's in alphabetical numerical order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 different configuration files that you can assign to a hotkey, or excuse me, 10 different hotkeys you can assign configuration files to. And the default hotkey is Alt-Shift-1 through 0 on the keyboard. So if you choose one of these, I'm just going to click on Load Configuration 1. You'll notice at the bottom it says Configuration File with a Browse button. So if I just click Browse, this is going to open up my File Explorer. I can go into my Users folder, username. Let's say I'll make Load Configuration 1 my morning configuration, and Load Configuration 2 is going to be my night configuration. Okay? Now that I've done that, remember the hotkeys were Alt-Shift-1 through 0. Alt-Shift-2, that's going to load my night configuration. Alt-Shift-1 is going to load my morning configuration. Those are the ones that I assigned. All right? So if you want to make it even easier, if you want to have multiple configurations of ZoomText that you can load at any time, you can use that Load Configurations hotkey feature to do so. Some people might want to do that if they just have a couple different schemes that they need to switch through from time to time. That might be a little bit better than setting up application settings for all the applications that you use. If you use a lot of applications, that might be a little bit cumbersome to set up all those app settings for all those individual programs. But the good thing is you only have to do it once, and then you're all set from there. Okay, so that's application settings and some of the things you can do with configuration files in ZoomText. Tons and tons of customization available in this program. So really, experiment around with it, play with it. Worst case scenario, you really mess things up, just go to File and Restore Defaults and restore back your default settings. Absolute worst case scenario, if you've really messed everything up on the machine as far as configurations go, just delete your user folder. It will load the factory default settings the next time you start ZoomText. So you just go in there, delete that folder, exit and restart ZoomText. It'll create brand new factory configuration for you, and you can start from fresh. Okay? All right. So that covers our demonstration here today. Just a couple other things I'll mention before I open it up to any questions. I have our sales and tech support hotlines listed here. We do offer free technical support on the product. Even if you're running a trial, tech support is available 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you have any questions about using ZoomText or run into any issues, you can always contact tech support. We also have a worldwide network of dealers that resell our product. So if you need any help, in-home assistance, and/or you want to go and see a product such as ZoomText or anything else in person, definitely rely on our dealer network for that. Some of them do offer in-home assistance and or training. They're listed by state here in the U.S. and then country internationally. So AI2 click on the Dealers tab or go to AI2.com/dealers. Okay, now it's your turn to ask any questions that you might have. Again, if you can click on the raise hand button, I'll know to unmute you, or just go ahead and type in your question to the chat panel or the questions panel. I'll pick it up there and I can pose it to the group. Any questions on anything that we covered here today, whether it was customizing the enhancements, what you can customize in App Reader and Doc Reader, speech settings, or configuration files. I know we went through quite a bit. Some of it's a little bit more advanced than a lot of people might use day to day, but lots of powerful features and settings in ZoomText that you may not have been aware of either. And if for whatever reason you just didn't get a chance to ask your question, or maybe thought of something later, you can always email the webinar staff. Our email address is learning@ai2.com. So you can always reach us that way as well if you have any follow-up questions after the fact. Scott was asking if there is a handout for hotkeys. I think we've published quite a few different hotkey guides. You can find the Quick Start Guide on our website. There's the Quick Start Guide that comes with ZoomText, or if you go to the Help menu in ZoomText and click on ZoomText Help, in the Help file on the left-hand side, double-click on Hotkeys and then ZoomText Hotkeys. Okay, they're all listed here. You can print them out if you like, just by clicking on the print button there. But it's in all the documentation you get with ZoomText as well. That quick reference guide is going to have all the hotkeys listed in it also, and that is in large print. But if you want an electronic version of it, it's right in the ZoomText Help menu. And that'll list all the hotkeys. There weren't very many hotkeys that we went over today. In fact, I don't think there were any that we really went over. I mentioned a couple. They're all listed there in that in the help system or the quick reference guide. If you were referring to some of the hotkeys and some of those custom configurations, I do know that we've posted on our blog the ZoomText with laptop configuration, what those hotkeys are. So if you just go to the blog, ai2.com/blog, and I think just search for laptop, that'll bring you to the post. Let me just see if I can find it here real quick while we're waiting to see if there's any other questions. Yeah, if you just go to the blog, ai2.com/blog, and type in laptop, you're going to see a tips and tricks video that we did. It says special hotkey set for laptops. There's a video there that shows you how to load it. And down towards the bottom in the comments, I've actually listed the hotkeys that were changed. So if that's what you're curious about, just open up that blog post and you can find it there. Lots of good information on our blog for those of you that haven't visited. We generally do 1 or 2 tips and tricks videos a month. It's listed there. We have articles every other, usually 2 to 3 a week. You know, it's not always ZoomText centric. It may be, you know, but it's always low vision centric, whatever we post. So it's not like we're always trying to sell you something on our blog. Lots of great content there. I would encourage everyone to take a look at it if you haven't already. All right, any other questions for us here today? Okay, doesn't look like there's any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar for today. Want to thank you guys for attending. We hope that you have a great Thanksgiving and enjoy the holiday and have a great rest of the day.